Well, friends, on behalf of the Raza Foundation and India Habitat Center, we welcome you to this second Charles Correa Memorial Lecture. The Raza Foundation, in collaboration with the India Habitat Center, organizes 9 annual memorial lectures for Kumar Gandhar, Habib Tanveer, Mani Kaul, Agge, Daya Krishna, V.S. Gaitonde, Kelucharan Mahapatra, Jangar Singh Shyam, etc. And the idea is not merely to remember a great figure, but also to create a critical mass about thinking about the genre to which they belonged. Charles Correa, you all know, so I don't have to tell you, one of the greatest architects that India had in the 20th century. And I had the privilege of working with him when he was constructing Bharat Bhavan. And a lot of fame and a lot of what could happen in Bharat Bhavan was due to the fact that the building was such. He used to call it a non-building. It was 1 lakh square feet, but if you enter the building at the roof level, and you do not see this 1 lakh at all. It was a kind of a building which was invisible. So Charles Correa was also a very thinking architect, not merely an architect who would, and he was a visionary. I had the occasion to see in Toronto his prayer house, which is an incredibly, I could never imagine that a prayer house could be, a prayer hall could be of this dimension and this resonance. I could not go, although he was wanting me to come to Lisbon, where he had built a building, I think, for a cancer hospital or some institute or whatever. And part of the building was, at least one element was floating in the sea. It was by the seashore. I recall that in Bharat Bhavan, we were allotted a piece of land on the bank of the big lake there. And came a chief minister who thought that the big lake, his residence was next to Bharat Bhavan. The chief minister's residence happens to be next to Bharat. And he thought there would be some tall building coming up and it will dwarf the chief minister's residence. So he ordered it to be shifted from there. And Charles was very keen to have it on a water body. And somewhere where both old and new Bhopal would connect. There was hardly any building in New Bhopal which was connecting with the old Bhopal. Luckily, the chief minister fell. He was voted out of office, and we were delighted for these reasons. And we got back the original land where it is now, which was built.
Charles Correa was not really known to talk about conservation or not really known for his interest in heritage building. He was a great architect. And, I was fortunate enough to have several very interesting discussions with him around the projects that we've been undertaking. Charles Correa was a member of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture Steering Committee. He was on the Aga Khan Award for Architecture jury. And the prayer hall that Sir mentioned was for the Aga Khan's community in Toronto. He's done several other interesting buildings for us. So having that association, it was quite incredible that he actually spent a lot of time on our sites talking about it. He was very close friends with Professor Muhammad Shahir, in whose memory also we should be doing a memorial lecture. But Shahir Saab did the landscape design for both Humayun's tomb and Sundar Nursery, and because of that, Mr. Correa would often come along. I also owe him a personal, debt or gratitude, because at some point he was on the interview committee for the Eisenhower Fellowship, which you kindly mentioned. And Mr. Correa recommended me from India. And usually what happens is two, two nominations go from India, and the Eisenhower Fellowships in Philadelphia chooses one. And I was number one on Mr. Correa's list, but not number one on the Philadelphia list. We're talking about conservation and development. And, this report was done in 1997. And 20 years later, it's still the same scenario. So what Mr. Correa realized, and what the Aga Khan realized many decades ago, was that cultural heritage can be a leverage for social economic gain to improve the quality of life. So the Aga Khan Development Network works in 30 countries. We have several, over a dozen agencies. But one thing that we all do is try to improve quality of life. And the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, for whom I work, we do it through culture. Now, it's a pity that the World Bank did this major study in 1997. It's basically saying these are important economic assets. There are economic assets. India's heritage is an economic asset, which is fragmented, not leveraged, not utilized, blah, 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 blah. Why is Agra a poor city? Why is the quality of life or the urban infrastructure in Agra so pathetic with the 3 World Heritage Sites and so on? I'm very honored. This room today has some people I hold in very, very high respect. So if they will just tolerate my little, side games, I would be very grateful. But how many of you recognize this fortification? It's in Delhi. Purana Killa Old Fort. You have to do better than that. It's a major fort. It's grand, as you can see. And this is a Delhi audience. Oh, I like the way you say it with such confidence, but it's not that easy. So unfortunately, this photograph was taken in the 1960s, early 70s. This building no longer survives. This was 1 kilometer from Connaught Place. This is the Killa Kadam Sharif, built by Firoz Shah Tughlaq. So, that is the sort of situation we are working in this country, when a building like this has been lost over a 1 generation period.